I want to talk about words. Words are powerful. God gave us a word, Sabbath, and what man did to it is a shame. But words are powerful. James tells us that let every man be swift to hear and slow to speak. The reason we need to be slow to speak is because once the word gets out, you can't pull it back in. It's out. And sometimes words can be misunderstood. They can be twisted. And there's something I remember that it was over 50 years ago. I was in Bible school, and it was my turn to speak in the chapel service. And after the service was over, one of the guys in the class, I think it was the class clown, came up to me, and he said, "Joe," he says, "when I listen to Billy Graham, I know I can't be like him. And when I watch Rex Humbard, who was the evangelist at the time, when I watch Rex Humbard, I know I'll never be like him. But when I heard you, I figured if you could do it, anybody could." It was a joke, but I never forgot it. And the reason I didn't forget it, because it got me to thinking. I want to make sure that when I speak, it is so simple that somebody will think, I get it. If he can do it, I can do it. And I built 50 years worth of ministry based on that wisecrack in Bible school. Words are powerful because they can make people cry. They can make them laugh. They can make them be afraid. They can make them angry. Words, intangible words, sounds, can do a lot of things. And that's why we used to sing a song in Sunday school, "Be careful, little tongue, what you say. There's a Father up above looking down in perfect love, so be careful, little tongue, what you say, because what you say can hurt." And words can be described, I just shared with the insult, words can be described as a light that's shining on some area that needs to be exposed. But words can also be a lightning bolt that destroys whatever it touches. That's why we need to be slow to speak. We need to think before we speak. The title of my message this morning is found in this phrase, stretch out your hand. Jesus is the one who said it, and the man he said it to had a withered hand. Now, I want you to look at this, stretch out your hand. What happens if stretching out your hand is impossible? Because it was impossible for that man with a withered hand to stretch out his hand. It only becomes possible because Jesus said to stretch out your hand. That's how powerful Jesus' word is. Because if Jesus says it, he takes the impossibilities and he makes them possible. That's why when we come into a service like this, we need to be listening, not listening to the pastor, listening to the speaker, but listening to what God is saying. Because God sometimes is saying something underneath, behind what you're hearing. And the Holy Spirit is zeroing into some area of our life, and if it's what he says, it can be done. Jesus told servants at the marriage feast at Canaan to go fill their water pots with water, but what they needed was wine. But they obeyed. And when they brought the water pots in and poured it out, it was wine. Because whatever Jesus says makes the impossible possible. Now in Matthew, the 12th chapter, we have a situation where the word Sabbath has been twisted. Now when Jesus had departed from there, he went into the synagogue, and behold, there was a man who had a withered hand. And they, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, they asked him, saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? And they asked that question because they wanted to accuse him. They knew what he would do. That's a setup. Then Jesus said to them, what man is there among you who has one sheep, and if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not lay hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value then is a man than a sheep? Therefore, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. There's something really interesting in this passage, that is that the religious leaders took the word Sabbath that God gave us to bless us, to revive us, to refresh us, and they turned it into a burden to restrict and to limit. Let me show you what I mean. According to the rules that they had created about the Sabbath, it was illegal to spit on the ground because that was considered work. However, if you spit on a rock, it's okay. But if you spit on the rock and it ended up on the ground, you're illegal. That's what they did to the Sabbath. A woman could not walk out on the Sabbath holding a mirror because she might be tempted to look in it and maybe straighten her hair. Illegal on the Sabbath. That's what they did to it. A scribe could not walk out of the house on the Sabbath holding a quill, a pen, because he may be tempted to write. That's considered work. And a tailor could not walk out of the house with a needle in his hand because he might be tempted to sew something. And a person could not walk more than 3/4 of a mile. You know how the Pharisees got around that? This is how they got around their own rule. They got around it. They, on Friday, would take an object from their home, walk 3/4 of a mile away, find a rock somewhere, put that article down on that rock. Then on the Sabbath day, they could leave their home and go 3/4 of a mile to where that article was, hiding behind a rock. And then from there, they can do another 3/4 of a mile because that little object was considered their home. That's what they did. That's what they did to the Sabbath. And you know what really is interesting to me is this. They made rules for the ruler. Jesus is the Lord. And they created a rule so that Jesus could not heal on the day of the Lord. Sabbath. When you tell God that God can't do something on his day, you're in deep water. And do people do that? Yes, they do. Ananias was so horrified when the Spirit of God told him to go and anoint Saul, who was blind. He was blinded on the road to Damascus. He said, he's a sinner, which implied, you can't forgive him. And when we get the feeling that Jesus can't forgive somebody, what we're doing is we're telling God what he can and cannot do. You cannot forgive Nicky Cruz. He's a gang leader. We can't tell God what he can do and can't. But they were doing that, and now they're trying to set Jesus up because they knew he would heal this man. Jesus said to the man, stretch out your hand. And it was restored, as whole as the other. What did he do? He brought his withered hand to the church. That's where we bring what is withered to the house of the Lord. It then infuriated the Pharisees. Then the Pharisees went out and plotted against him. This was going to be the beginning of the actions that they were taking to destroy Jesus, bring him to the cross. Somebody would read a story like this and say, what does this have to do with me? I mean, the man's hand is withered, Jesus heals him. What does that? That's what it means. It means that there are things in our lives that are withered. And we need to bring them to Jesus. Dreams that we had that withered. Jesus wants to handle it. Opportunities that came and gone, maybe the pandemic came and stripped the opportunity away that you were hoping for. Jesus wants to handle withered opportunities. Hopes that withered in plans, that withered in relationships, that wither. Jesus wants to become a part. It's interesting that Jesus came for those who are sick. He said, physician is not called for someone who is healed, for healthy. He's there for the sick person. And Jesus is interested in the sick. He's interested in the hurting. He's interested in those that have issues that have withered. So this story has an awful lot to do with us. Because the place, the house of the Lord, the place where Jesus is the place where we are to bring whatever is withered. And we're told, like Jesus told this withered man, stretch out your hand. Now, there are going to be times when Jesus is speaking to us, and the application of this is that when we stretch out our hand, we need to stretch it out towards Jesus. He's the one that told us to stretch our hand. So we stretch our hand towards him because the need, he's got the supply for what it is we need, and he told us to stretch out our hand, so we just simply do what he said to do. We don't have to ask questions. What do you mean? Why? Just do it. Just do what he said. Now, our words are powerful too. You know, I could go on to talk about Jesus' powerful words to still a storm, to touch a leper and heal him. But our words, your words, my words, are powerful. I was reading some time ago about the people who live in the Solomon Islands, and they had a practice, a custom, that if they had to chop down a large tree, they would sit around and stand around this tree for 30 days, yelling, screaming, and hollering at it. And if you were to ask them, what are you doing? They would say, we are killing the spirit of the tree. And we would respond because of our increased knowledge, our sophisticated ways. That's superstitious. That's primitive thinking. And yet, words kill friendships. Kill them. They kill relationships. Just the words we use. The tone of the word. The direction of the word. The timing of the word. Kills, breaks hearts that were once beating and happy and now are broken. It brings tears. Words. It erects walls and barriers so that we can't get through certain things because this is keep out. It's a word. And it tears down a person's self-esteem. Words. God only knows how many children have had their self-esteem stripped kept away from them because of harsh words. And sometimes the parent or the person that's using those harsh words doesn't even realize that they're being understood as harsh. But words can tear at a person's self-esteem. That's why we taught the kids in Sunday school, be careful, little tongue, what you say. Because words are important and words can hurt. Words can also bless. We know they can hurt. They can also bless. I want to give you an illustration. It's Carol Ann. I don't know what the age was at the time, I think, but in my mind she was 8 years old at the time. This may or may not be 8 years old. Is this 8 years old? Could this child be 8 years old? Yes. Let's take a vote. What do you think? Yes. Okay, 8. Okay, she's 8 years old. It was about 8 o'clock at night. Nancy and I were going to watch a TV program, and it was just about ready to start. So I told Carol Ann, put your pajamas on. So she put her pajamas on. And to get in bed, she got in bed. And she says, Dad, I want a glass of water. So I went in and got a glass of water, gave her a glass to drink. She took a few sips, and then she said, Dad, I have to go potty. Meanwhile, the program is about ready to start. So she gets back into bed, and she says, Dad, tell me a story. I told her a quick story. Jonah got swallowed by a whale, then he got out. And then she said, Dad, would you pray? So I prayed a quick prayer. And then she prayed. And she prayed for everybody, including Muffin, her dog. And finally, she's ready to go to bed. And the program has already started. And I'm going to walk out of the room. And Carol Ann, in bed, puts her arms around my neck and says, Daddy, I love you. At that moment, the fact that I can remember that, at that moment, I did not care what the program was. I don't even remember what it was. All I cared about were those little words that can change the course of a day. That's how powerful words are. Our words. Your words. Words that you use today, words that you used yesterday, words that you will use tomorrow. Those words are powerful. Those words can even liberate or paralyze. Words can paralyze in fear and paralyze our emotions and keep us stuck in bitterness and resentment, and we just can't get rid of this thing. David wrote in Psalm 143, he said this. He said, I stretch out my hands to you. I stretch out my hands to the Lord. Now, in school, when a child raises their hands because they have an answer, but when David says, I stretch out my hands to you, it was because the Lord is the answer. He's the one. He's the helper. He's wisdom. He's strength. Lord, I stretch out my hand to you because what I need is where you are. I stretch out my hand to you. When children are little, we grab them by the hand and we take them across the street. That's typical for a parent to do that because we don't want them walking across the street alone. So we hold their hand. We make sure we get to the other side. We're God's kids. He takes us by the hand. And he leads us across the street. That's how dependent we are on him. I need thee, oh into trouble and you realize how much that word means to you. Every hour I need thee. Lord, I stretch out my hand to you. Because you're the only one that can handle the difficulty that I'm facing. This withered thing that I have needs your strength, your healing touch. I raise my hand to you. You're my God. And without you, I'm nothing. With you, I can handle anything that you decide I can handle. You'll make a way in the wilderness for me. I stretch out my hand to you. And when I go through the waters, you'll be with me. I stretch out my hand to you. And in the fire, I will not be burned. I stretch out my hand to you. I need you. That's how much we need the Lord. Didn't he stretch out his hand for us on Calvary? It was for you. It was for me. And in thinking about this, Jesus stretching out his hand because we need his hand, stretching out his hand. Peter was sinking in the Sea of Galilee, and he cried out, Lord, save me. And Jesus reached down and pulled him up. That's our testimony. I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry. From the waters lifted me, now safe. God, I want to be safe. Am I? I think of this story when I'm going through this story, and I think about this man who has been healed. His arm now, his hand is no longer withered, and he's walking. The scripture doesn't tell us what it was like when he walked out of the synagogue, but I happen to know because I'm a minister, I know. And he walked out of the synagogue saying, I've just seen Jesus, and I'll never be the same again. That's what it means to see Jesus. Not just see him in a picture, not just see him on the cross, not just to see him, to really see him, to behold him, to behold his beauty, to come into his sanctuary. Like David says, one thing have I desired, and that will I seek after. And you wonder, I wonder what it is that he's seeking after. And he says, to behold your beauty. I just want to look at you. Because when I look at you, I realize how far I've got to go to get to be like you. And you promised that you would help me become like you. I just want to look at you. I want to see the template that I am working towards. I want to see the love that you have. I want to see the compassion that you have. I want to see the heart that you have. I need you. We need him. We can't make it without him. And sometimes the need that we have is just simply to come into his presence and say, Lord, I get this area. It needs to be healed. Heal me. Heal me. Nobody knows about this, but you do. Heal me. Nobody needs to know about this, but you do. Heal me in the area that's withered. In the area where I feel lost, in the area where I feel wasted, in the area where I feel I'm gone. Incapable, limited, handicapped. Heal me. Because you have what I need to give me the strength that I'm going to need to follow you. I want to be able to leave like that man with the withered hand that was healed and say, I've just seen Jesus. And I'll never be the same again. What a look. Just one look. And that look is to absorb him. Paul, who had been ministered for years, he's at the end of his ministry, he says, that I might be like him. In the fellowship of his sufferings, being made conformable unto his death. I want to be like him. I want to be like him. I preached about him. I need to be like him. I know that he can do what no other power can do. And I have a need. And so, Lord, touch me. As we sing, this altar is open. Heal me, Jesus, heal me. And I'll be glad to pray with you.
Jesus, heal me. I need a brand new touch from you, my Lord. Oh, heal me. Jesus, heal me. Let the fullness of my life now be restored.
Let's sing it again. Jesus, heal me. Heal me.
Heal me.
Jesus, heal me.
Heal me, Lord. I need a brand new touch from you, my Lord. Heal me, Jesus, heal me. Let the fullness of my life now be restored. Let's sing it with me. Heal me. Sing it to the Lord. Jesus, heal me. For I need a brand new touch from you, my Lord. Heal me, Jesus. Jesus, heal me. Let the fullness of my life now be restored. For the power of the Lord is present to heal.